This whole story was written on my therapist's recommendation. She said I would be able to convey the feelings with surprising accuracy through the text. I get it. I've developed speech problems too, and talking for long periods can be unbearable. But to be honest, even before all these events, I wasn't living a carefree life. Due to certain issues at my old job, I had to quit, and because of a conflict with my boss, I couldn't get the same position at another branch. I must have been blacklisted. But I didn't give up. I found a client online and offered my services. The project was estimated to take about 2 months, and during that time I needed a simple side job. I chose a pickup point that was opening in a nearby building on the first floor. I didn't even search for vacancies online. I just approached the owner in person and asked to work there. He agreed without any problems, taught me how to use the software, showed me how to process incoming orders and handle returns. I was honest about my intentions, admitting that I would be bringing my laptop and working on my project, but it wouldn't affect my duties at the pickup point. Plus, I could work alone with the 7/0 schedule. We discussed the salary, signed the contract, went to the copy centre to make copies of my documents, and I officially started. The list of responsibilities for an employee at the pickup point was almost laughably short. Aside from handling orders, I only needed to clean up when necessary. In the first weeks, the owner opened and closed the shop himself, so I had to leave home half an hour earlier because he visited his other 3 points after me. But over time, he began to trust me and eventually gave me the keys. At first, it was quiet. Barely any customers came, and there were very few deliveries. One day, the owner arrived looking gloomy and upset, saying he'd give me 2 days off while he sorted out an important issue. In the end, he cancelled a contract with one marketplace and started working with another. The sign on the door changed, the interior colour was updated, and I returned to my usual duties. Customers increased, making it harder to work on my project, but I managed both tasks. I remember the evening that changed my life vividly. It was after sunset when the street lights turned on and a strange man entered the store. It seemed like the lights at my workstation dimmed slightly. He was wearing a long, checkered cashmere coat and a curious hat like a detective from an old movie. His eyes were furious, brows furrowed, and his mouth twisted to the left. He held an open cardboard box without any identifying marks. I, as usual, pushed aside my laptop, greeted him, picked up the barcode scanner and asked, "Are you here for a pickup?" "It's not right," he hissed so angrily that a chill ran down my spine. I had, of course, heard of rude customers or those who come to argue, but nothing like this. So strange and genuinely frightening. The odd man stepped closer to the counter, placed the box down and shoved it with his fingers. "They sent the wrong thing," he said, even louder, then slowly began to back away towards the exit. I was confused, examined the package again, but found no sticky spot where a label might have been removed. "Listen," I said, "are you sure you ordered from us?" He froze, staring at me, breathing more heavily. His broad shoulders trembled slightly and his pale cheeks twitched with some kind of convulsive jaw movements. Suddenly the man leaned his head forward, squinted, and gritted his teeth as if my question had deeply insulted him. "Answer me," he grumbled and stepped closer. I lost my ability to speak. Terror choked me and a lump formed in my throat. Suddenly my phone rang on the table. I flinched and glanced at the screen. It was Michael, the owner of the pickup point. The client remained silently glaring at me, his eyes narrowed with a devilish squint and lips tightly pursed. I reached for the table. The strange man didn't move, his gaze still locked on mine, not watching my hands. Then I quickly grabbed my phone and answered. "Hello, I can't talk now." "John, shut up, you hear?" Michael nearly shouted into my ear. "Don't talk to him, just wait. Let him leave." I nearly fainted then. My hands turned ice cold, and my knees felt weak with a prickling sensation. With all my remaining strength, I turned my head to the right and looked up at the surveillance camera. My boss was watching me through it, and I shuddered to think what would have happened if he hadn't noticed the sinister client. The man in the hat soon calmed down, stopped twitching his shoulders, straightened up, and began to back away towards the door. Just before reaching it, he suddenly bolted outside so fast that I couldn't catch a glimpse of the back of his head or his coat. Suddenly, the dim lights returned to their usual brightness. My lips trembled as I sat down in the chair, ears ringing from the stress and my vision blurred with strange, crawling spots. "All right, it's over, John. Go home. Tomorrow, if you want, you can take the day off with full pay." "Don't worry. But who was that? Will there be more strange customers like that?" What was going on? "Hello," Michael then muttered. "Put the box in the back room and get out of there." He hung up. I put down the phone. The screen was slick with sweat from my hands, which were still trembling, and my shoulders and back ached terribly, as they always did after intense stress. The box on the counter seemed to emanate a dark energy. It felt disgusting and unclean, as if evil itself was sealed inside it, waiting for me to get closer. My stomach churned, and my palms were clammy with sweat. Slowly I stood up from the chair, gripping the armrests, took the box and cautiously opened it. Inside, cushioned by wood shavings, lay a black VHS tape without any labels or markings. When I touched it, something inside me stirred. It happened suddenly, like a snap. The fear vanished, replaced by burning curiosity. Without showing any outward signs, I went to the back room, took the tape out and hid it under my shirt. I quickly packed my laptop and cables, slung my backpack over my shoulder, turned off the lights and left the building. Outside, I moved the tape to a side pocket on my backpack. Then, with one hand locking the door and the other dialing my dad's number, I called him. He answered quickly. "Hey, John. Why so late?" "Hey, Dad. Quick question. Is the VCR still working?" I asked nervously. "Which one?" "The one for discs?" He replied, puzzled. No, for cassettes. I've got one I need to check out. Dad said he'd take a look." Meanwhile, I locked up and made my way through the back alleys to another street. "Listen, John," Dad grumbled. "How do I put this?" "It's in the closet. Wires should be intact. You need it by when?" "I need it now," I panted, out of breath. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. It's urgent." "Whoa!" Dad was startled. "What's going on?" "I'll explain when I get there," I said, and hung up. My heart was pounding wildly, and even the cool night air felt suffocating. It hurt to breathe, my lungs constricted by anxiety. I imagined 1,000 terrifying scenarios, from ritual murder caught on tape to a satanic ritual, or just Michael coming after me to retrieve the tape with a spare key. Before reaching my dad's house, I came up with a story in case things went south. The plan was that my boss wouldn't notice the missing tape, and I'd return it that night. If he saw it on the cameras, I'd explain that I was so rattled I forgot to arm the building's alarm system, so I came back. If he confronted me, I'd admit I just wanted to see what was on it, come what may. Dad opened the door, offered me tea, and started asking about work. Then Mum came out of the kitchen, hugging me and bombarding me with questions. I brushed them off, dragging Dad to the TV. "Hey, John," Dad said, "is everything plugged in, right?" "The TV's newer than the VCR." I told him everything was fine, explaining it would connect through RCA cables, and then I inserted the tape. Immediately, I had a bad feeling, yanked out the yellow cable for the video and whispered, "Rewind to the start, then I'll reconnect." I pressed the rewind button. As the old machine whirred, I told Dad what had happened. He laughed. "Nah, John, no way I'm watching that. What if something creepy comes out?" Then Mum appeared in the doorway, asking who or what would come out, but Dad waved her away. The VCR clicked and stopped. I took a deep breath, reconnected the video cable, and pressed play. At first the screen was blue, with white English text in the corner. Then the image appeared, along with sound. It was a recording, June 2003. A static camera filmed the empty hallway of a typical apartment. A polished cabinet ran along the wall, and opposite hung a small mirror. The wallpaper was dark red, designed to look like vertical bricks. We used to have similar ones, soft, a little convex. The floor was covered in yellow linoleum with blurred shapes due to the poor quality of the video, and a worn rug lay on top of it. Through the tape's crackling static, I heard a faint muttering and humming. It grew louder, morphing into a familiar tune. Someone was humming a popular song from that era. Then a short, chubby girl in a leopard print bathrobe and dog-shaped slippers stepped out from around the corner. She admired herself in the mirror, scrutinizing her face and popping pimples. Dad and I exchanged glances. He was watching with raised eyebrows in surprise, and then he joked, "Well, there's the creepy figure." I gestured for him to be quiet, and stared at the screen, straining my eyes until something clicked. In the frame beside the hallway, there was a small dark section to the right. It seemed to be part of a bedroom. Something about it looked oddly familiar. I grabbed the TV remote, opened the picture settings, and started cranking up the brightness. When I closed the menu, I heard Dad curse quietly behind me. "Oh my God, John," he rasped, coughing. "What is it, Mum? Why are you coughing? Got a cold? Oh God, what kind of horror are you two watching?" And her footsteps retreated into the kitchen. Dad repeated, "John, for the love of God," but I couldn't look away. In the darkness of the frame, I clearly saw a familiar grey face with a flattened nose. But now, this sinister figure wasn't frowning. It was swaying, nodding as if to say, "Yes, yes, you understand correctly. It's about to happen." A wave of goosebumps swept over my neck and shoulders as the video quality degraded. The girl's song was distorting, dissolving into static. The screen split with white lines, a hum grew, a screeching noise pierced the air, and then the recording abruptly stopped. The screen went black, leaving only static and faint crackling. Dad approached the TV and switched it off. "That was intense," he said quietly. "John, I've seen all sorts of weird art house stuff, those horror films where they actually show people getting cut up. But this was different." He shivered, like he was trying to shake off a bad feeling. I swallowed hard and nodded. "I know, I have no idea what to make of it." He looked pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. The room felt thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. I couldn't take my eyes off the VHS tape lying on the floor. What had happened made no sense. "Listen, John," Dad suddenly said, "maybe we should just forget about this tape. Toss it. Let someone else deal with it. It's not our problem." I considered his words, but despite all the terror I'd felt, something inside me couldn't let go of that cursed tape. It felt like there was something there I still didn't understand. I shook my head and replied, "No, Dad. I can't just throw it away. I have to figure out what this all means." Dad's face turned cold, his eyes narrowing with disapproval. "Fine, do what you want, son. But I'm not helping you with this. You're on your own." His words hit me like a knife to the chest. I picked up the tape, carefully slid it into my backpack, and headed for the door. Mum looked at me with confusion, not understanding what was going on. Dad just stood there, silent and fearful. When I stepped outside, the night felt even heavier than before. I walked slowly, trying to catch my breath, each step echoing in my head like a heartbeat. I knew what I had to do, take the tape back to the pickup point. But the anxiety gnawed at me as if something unseen was watching, waiting to pounce. On the way back, I called Michael. The phone rang several times before I heard his shaky voice. "John, what's going on? Where are you?" I told him what I saw on the tape, leaving out the strange figure. He listened carefully and said, "Get back to the pickup point. We'll sort this out." I quickened my pace and soon arrived at the building. The light inside was on. I went in expecting to see Michael, but the space was empty. That eerie feeling came back, like the world around me was slightly out of sync. I closed the door behind me, approached the counter and placed the tape down, unsure of what to do next. "Michael!" I called out. There was no answer. I was about to dial him again when I heard a faint creak. The door to the storage room was slightly ajar. A chill shot down my spine. I moved closer and cautiously pushed the door open. The storage room was empty, but it felt different. The shelves were in the same places, but the light was dim. The shadows seemed deeper. I walked along the rows, brushing my hand against the wall, until I came to the spot where I'd first found the box containing the cursed tape. Now, instead of the familiar cardboard box, there was a black wooden chest covered in dust. I knelt down to inspect it, noticing strange symbols carved into the wood. I had no idea what they meant, but something compelled me to open it. At first I hesitated, but then, as if under some otherworldly influence, I pried it open. Inside, cushioned on a velvet lining, lay an old pocket compass. Its needle was spinning wildly, unable to settle on any direction. Suddenly I felt the air around me shift. The light grew dimmer, and the air thickened. It was as if I'd been transported to another world, where none of the normal rules applied. The door to the storage room slammed shut behind me, and I spun around, but it was too late. Out of the shadows, a hand in a black glove reached for me. A cold grip paralyzed my body, and then everything went black. I woke up in complete darkness, surrounded by silence. Panic seized me. I had no idea where I was and could only feel around in the dark for a way out. The walls were cold and smooth, and when I finally found something that felt like a door, I pushed my way through. When I stepped outside, I found myself in a forest. Dark shadows surrounded me, and only the pale light of the moon filtered through the tree branches, lighting a narrow path ahead. In my hand, I still held that cursed compass, and its needle suddenly stopped spinning, pointing straight ahead. Without a second thought, I followed its direction, sensing that my path led to something inevitable and ominous. A shudder ran down my spine, but I kept moving, following the strange compass that now seemed to guide me on a singular course. Step by step, I walked down the path, which felt endless. The further I went, the darker the shadows became, as if the night itself was trying to trap me. It seemed like the forest was alive, whispering threats as branches stretched across my path. Suddenly a light appeared in the distance. It flickered, growing brighter and dimmer, but its cold glow drew me in. I quickened my pace, not taking my eyes off that solitary light. Finally the compass needle stopped, pointing directly at it. As I got closer, I saw the light came from a small wooden cabin in the heart of the forest. It looked abandoned for decades. Its walls were mouldy, the roof sagged, and the windows were boarded up. Only a faint glow seeped through the cracks, beckoning me to enter. I stopped in front of the door, wiping my sweaty palms on my jeans, and took a deep breath. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but something, maybe madness, maybe that unrelenting pull that had gripped me since the beginning, pushed me to open the door. The rusty hinges creaked, echoing in the still night air. Inside, the cabin looked even darker than outside. Its walls were draped in cobwebs, and the air reeked of dampness. In one corner, beneath a faint source of light, stood an old wooden table, and on it lay a small box, one that I instantly recognized. It was the same box from the pickup point. I walked to the table, reached out and picked up the box. It was light, but it felt as though something dreadful was hidden inside. My heart pounded as I slowly opened it. Inside lay an old black and white photograph, faded with time and worn around the edges. It showed a man, the same strange visitor in the long checkered coat and hat. He was standing in front of an abandoned building, his fierce eyes seemingly burning through the lens. At that moment, time seemed to stand still. Everything around me blurred, and I felt myself losing consciousness again. I tried to grab onto the table for support, but my hands went right through it as if it were mere illusion. The space around me began to ripple. Walls disappeared, and I felt myself falling into an abyss, as if the ground had been ripped from beneath me. I woke up again, lying on the floor of the pickup point. The dim lighting was the same as the night it all started. It was silent, as if nothing had happened. I looked at my hands. I was still holding the same photograph, which now seemed disturbingly real. Shaken, I struggled to catch my breath, but my body felt foreign, like I no longer had control over it. Suddenly the front door burst open, and a cold wind rushed in. I turned and saw Michael standing there, his face pale and eyes wide. "John, what did you do?" he shouted, but his voice sounded distant, muffled, like it was coming from underwater. I didn't have time to answer. An unseen force yanked me backward, and I fell to the floor. Michael rushed to me, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me, but I couldn't make out his words. Everything blurred into a low hum that echoed in my ears. My vision went dark as sparks danced before my eyes. I woke up again, but this time in a hospital room. White walls, the smell of antiseptic, and the rhythmic beeping of machines surrounded me. I tried to sit up, but my body was too weak. Michael was sitting by my bed, looking worn out and hollow-eyed. When he noticed I was awake, he let out a heavy sigh. "You were unconscious for a long time, John," he said, his voice trembling. "I thought you weren't coming back." His eyes glistened with a mix of relief and fear. "What happened? Why am I in the hospital?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Michael averted his gaze, unable to meet my eyes. "You collapsed at the pickup point," he said quietly. "Then you started rambling, saying something about the tape, the compass, the forest and that cabin. I didn't know what to do, so I called an ambulance. They said it was a nervous breakdown." He paused, struggling for words. "I found the photo you were holding. It disappeared. It vanished the moment I touched it." His words cut through me like a cold knife. The photo that had seemed so real was gone. I didn't know what to believe anymore. What was real and what was a figment of my imagination? "What about the tape?" I asked, struggling to sit up. Michael's eyes were filled with anguish. "It's gone. I looked for it, but it's nowhere to be found." A heavy weight lifted from my chest, but instead of relief, I felt a gaping emptiness. It was as if I had lost something crucial, something that had changed my life forever, and now it was beyond my reach. A cold fear settled deep inside me, the fear that I would never truly understand what had happened. The next few days were a blur. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, drifting in and out of sleep. Every night I saw flashes of the cabin, the compass, and that cursed photo. My therapist insisted I write everything down, convinced it would help me make sense of the chaos. But I wasn't sure I wanted to relive it, even on paper. I burned every record, destroyed the tapes I had, and erased every photo. But sometimes I wonder if it's really over, if this is the end, or just the beginning. If you enjoyed this story and content like this, drop a comment below. I read them all. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends.